researching my own family, and particularly when I'm taking on queries from other people, one question that I often ask is, what do you want to find out about your ancestors? Personal experience can make us curious to know how our ancestors might have coped if they were in the same situation that we found ourselves in. I have recently had a cold and a horrendous cough, and that got me thinking, what if it wasn't 2021? What if I was to step back in time, say to 1861? Maybe I could find some information that might give me a clue what types of medicines and medical services my own ancestors and your own ancestors may have been able to get their hands on. More to the point, how did the manufacturers persuade our ancestors that those medicines were just what you needed when you were ill? Through a little bit of idle searching on the British newspaper archives, I happened to spot the surname Hall, and I got really excited by this. I thought I'd found an early advert for Hall's cough sweets, and it was in a Preston newspaper. Halls were from Lancashire, were they? Yes, but they weren't around in 1861. Thomas Harold Hall and his brother Norman Smith Hall, the cough sweet people, didn't set their company up until 1893, and both were actually born in Bury. By 1911, Thomas, who was then 38, was describing himself as a master confectioner, so he was playing up the sweets angle rather than the medicinal side of things. While his brother Norman, aged 37, lived next door. He was a commercial traveller. Was he going door to door trying to encourage people to stock cough sweets? They actually lived next door to each other in Whitefield near Bury. They're not the ones that are advertising in the Preston newspaper in 1861. They weren't born. So who was the Hall who was advertising in the Preston papers? Fortunately, his advert explains all. Consumption and all diseases of the chest and lungs radically cured by Hall's balsamic cough elixir and cough pills. He goes on to claim that consumption, bronchitis, asthma, coughs, cold, hoarseness, influenza, spitting of blood, whooping cough, pain and soreness of the breast, difficulty in breathing and all diseases of the chest and lungs can be radically cured by Hall's balsamic cough elixir, which is prepared only by John Hall, medical botanist of 13 Theatre Street, just off Fishergate in Preston. This cough elixir stuff is being sold in bottles at 7.5p, 1 shilling and half-a-pence, 2 shillings and 9, 4 shillings and 6, and 11 shillings each. And to be fair to this Mr. Hall, it's absolutely great marketing. He goes even further still. He encourages people to take preemptive measures to protect themselves against coughs. In hundreds of cases of common or slight cold, caught in the autumn or winter, so very topical for this time of year, that a few doses of the elixir would remove, if neglected, will be consumption in spring. So in other words, if you buy my cough elixir now and you use it, your cough will not linger. It may otherwise get worse, and it could even turn into consumption, or TB if you'd rather, tuberculosis, or any of the other many names for it. And he even goes so far as to promote a little treatise that he's written, Hall's Treatise on Consumption. So he's claiming to know all about consumption here. And he supplies the names and addresses of printers in Clitheroe and Chorley, the post office in Wigan, and a draper's shop, very randomly, in Southport, where you can pick up a copy to read and buy for yourself. Because what he doesn't actually say is whether or not this leaflet was free. There's something else that he doesn't tell us though. What is actually in this mixture? You buy anything from your local chemist today, they will ask about allergies, interactions with other drugs before they'll actually sell it to you. From what Mr. Hall seems to be suggesting, they possibly didn't do that in 1861. From a family history point of view, John Hall placed his advert in the Preston Chronicle at just the right time. 3 months later, the census was taken, and sure enough, there he was at 13 Theatre Street in Preston. He's a medical botanist. He's 57 years old. He was born in Harrington in Cumberland. His wife Anne is with him. She's 50, she's from Hexham in Northumberland. Also with them is an 8-year-old granddaughter and a 21-year-old servant. So that gives you some sort of idea about the kind of lifestyle that a medical botanist could afford. John Hall lived at 13 Theatre Street for at least 10 years. On census night 1851, he calls himself a medical galvanist. Essentially, he's offering to treat people using electrical currents. Medical galvanism was certainly not new in 1851. What exactly was going on? Roughly 17 years before John Hall was born, a doctor from Bedfordshire was willing to try a potentially shocking kind of therapy on his patients. G. Dixon, surgeon and man midwife of Woburn, begs leave to inform his friends and the public that he has for several years experienced the efficacy of electricity. He recommends it particularly for obstinate aches, headaches, rheumatism, menstrual obstructions, weak eyes, and many other complaints. That's suspiciously general, isn't it? He points out that his mode of electricity is quite different from the adopted mode, so other people are doing this, are they? He does not terrify his patients with the pomp of a useless apparatus, it being so mild and simple that a child may be electrified and not feel any terrible effect. He seems to be implying that all sorts of medical complaints can be treated by electrifying the sufferers, and he's even prepared to try it out on children. He's also willing to assist the poor in this way. The poor electrified every day from 10 to 11 o'clock, whether they want to be or not. The terms otherwise are 18 pence a time or 1 shilling each if more than one are electrified. The ethics of this could be a whole other video. He is willing to try this cure, probably fake cure, on children and the poor, and he's offering group discounts. This is sounding worrying. When you look closely at the beginning of G. Dixon's advert, he's a bit of a jack of all trades. When he's not hooking you up to electricity, he's also a surgeon. In addition to this, he's making the most of what seems to have been a really popular trend in the late 18th century. He is a man midwife. The royal family was full of interesting characters, but the one I particularly want to look at now is George IV, or to be more precise, his very popular daughter, Princess Charlotte. She was his only child. He and his wife, Princess Caroline, famously did not get on at all well, but they did manage to have Princess Charlotte. On the 5th of November 1817, Charlotte gave birth to a sadly stillborn boy after, I think, about 3 or 4 days of labour. Unsurprisingly, she herself died about 5 hours later. She was only 21. What was notable about Charlotte was that she was attended not just by her own personal doctor, Matthew Bailey, but also by a Dr. Sims and Sir Richard Croft, who was a doctor but was also known as an accoucheur. Roughly translated, that is a French term for a male midwife. In the late 18th century, in the Regency period, that was the latest trend for the well-to-do. They would call on the services of one of these accoucheurs, or as they were also sometimes known, a man midwife. In November 1786, the apparently married couple, Mr. White, surgeon and man midwife, and Mrs. White, midwife, of number 2 London House Yard on the north side of St. Paul's Churchyard, were working together as a team. They promised to accommodate pregnant ladies with genteel separate apartments where they will be treated with care, tenderness and the utmost secrecy. Something else is going on here, I think. Are they possibly assisting any women, married or single, who might need to conceal the birth of an unplanned or unwanted child, perhaps one that has been conceived while their husband has been away, perhaps he's in the army or navy? Are they needing to quietly spend a bit of time away from home to give birth to this child, who will then be given up for adoption, no questions asked? The Whites are not exactly subtle about this service, and amongst their other facilities, they offer to post printed copies of Mr. White's address to the community on concealed pregnancy, worthy of the perusal of ladies whose situation requires a temporary retirement. Surely they haven't printed a how-to guide to how to conceal a pregnancy, have they? The title sounds like they're not disapproving of the practice. This pamphlet was not free, it was priced at 2 shillings. So Mr. White is making money from this leaflet. That is absolutely blatant. Not long after this advert was placed, of course, our friend Mr. Dixon in Bedfordshire had placed his advert in the Northampton Mercury. Mr. Dixon had claimed that electrification could effectively regulate your reproductive cycle if you were female. It could make sure that things turned up as expected. Mr. White, however, had another solution to this. For an astonishing £1 and 2 shillings, he would sell you his restorative sallow pills, an effective remedy to remove all obstructions or irregularities. Now, my research suggests that there was a market for these kind of pills, but what is this removing obstructions business? Is it some kind of code for something that effectively induces an abortion or a miscarriage? Or is it something else entirely? There are many reasons why an interrupted reproductive cycle would be unwelcome news to our female ancestors. We know today that pregnancy is not the only reason this can occur. This knowledge isn't exactly new. From the adverts that I have been able to find in 18th century newspapers, it seems that women living 250, 270 years ago had some idea about this too. The Manchester Mercury of the 20th of June 1758 carries a whole column of adverts for some fantastically named medicines, including Dr. Ratcliffe's famous purging elixir, Chase's balsamic pill for asthmatic complaints, Dr. France's female strengthening elixir, and Dr. Hooper's female pills, 40 in a box for 1 shilling. And it seems that these Dr. Hooper's pills were popular for quite a long time. They were still being advertised in the Manchester Mercury of the 17th of October 1786. So how could customers be sure that they were getting an authentic bottle of Dr. Hooper's female pills? The genuine pills have a stamp pasted on the outside of each box, in which are engraved, by favour of the Commissioners of the Stamp Office, the names of John, Joseph and Benjamin Hooper, sons of the late Doctor and the present proprietors. So it looks like Dr. Hooper did such a good job of marketing his female pills that he was actually able to hand his business on for the next generation to take it over. And the Hooper brothers were not the only ones to cater for this feminine issue. An alternative brand was available. And this led me on to consider some entirely different reasons that ladies may have wished to make use of certain medications. Strangely enough, they're things that we can still relate to today. Welsh's female pills are now well known to be eminently efficacious in removing obstructions to which unmarried ladies at a certain period are subject. Also, what is called the green sickness. I've heard of the green sickness before. It's actually mentioned in Jane Sharp's book, the Midwives book, which was published back in 1671. But what is the green sickness? We get some clues about what it might be when we look at the advert for Welsh's female pills. The green sickness is denoted by a yellow pallid countenance which proceeds from want of exercise or relaxation of the system. The pills will create an appetite, correct bad digestion, remove giddiness. They will also treat headaches, pains in the stomach, shortness of breath and palpitations of the heart. The green sickness actually still exists. Today we would probably call it iron deficiency anemia. Certainly the pale skin, the giddiness, the headaches, shortness of breath, irregular heartbeat, the general feeling of weakness and malaise and being too tired to do anything are recognised symptoms of anemia today. And it's interesting when we think that these are female pills, they are being targeted, in Welsh's case, at young women. So in the year 1800 or thereabouts, you would be lucky if you had more than a basic education. You could easily be working as a domestic servant, maybe from the age of 12 to potentially all of your life if you didn't happen to get married. Now of course this is before modern technology, this is before dishwashers, hot water systems, washing machines, electricity. You might be cooking, washing, hauling water, coal, wood up and down stairs so your employers could have a fire in their room, have the water heated so they could have a bath. If you're a farmer's daughter, you might be milking, you might be making cheese, you'd be helping with the housework, maybe you'd be lending a hand with the harvest at that time of year. You might even be going to market. If you can't afford at least a horse, you're going to be walking everywhere. So when you think that life in general was going to require a lot more energy and a lot more calories than we do in our modern day-to-day existence, anemia or any condition that leaves you really short on energy is not going to be at all helpful. In severe cases, yes, it probably could affect your reproductive cycle. And I think the advert does offer a pretty convincing argument that these Welsh's female pills are designed to boost the energy levels of women of reproductive age. The article is quoted as saying, to married women they are recommended as the best strengtheners after bad lyings in, so difficult childbirth, or for debility, either proceeding from too long suckling or frequent miscarriages. Again, you've got things like the calories required for breastfeeding, possible risks of massive blood loss and a bad miscarriage. There are lots of ways that your energy levels could just be completely sapped by things that fortunately we have got the medical science and technology to work around a bit better today. factor in as well that maybe women continued to nurse their babies because they were hoping to delay another pregnancy as well, so that calorie consumption is going to be used up a lot faster for a lot longer. It is bound to affect your energy levels. So today we do understand more about the science behind that kind of thing, but I think our ancestors may not have understood the science, but I think they would have understood the symptoms and would have probably had a reasonable idea about what was causing them. But perhaps what these female pills were is like a prototype iron supplement or multivitamin. The adverts don't really say anything about the ingredient. I suppose they didn't have the technology to analyse them chemically. So it's impossible to say whether these things were actually going to be effective or whether they were just a placebo. Overall, the effects and purposes of these female pills does remain suspiciously vague. I suspect that a lot of women did use them hoping that they would work a little bit like modern emergency contraception. Whether they did or not is something we perhaps will never know. As I live in Britain, I've grown up with the National Health Service. My late grandparents are not here now, so I cannot ask them what they remember about the era when you still did have to pay for medical treatment. But I imagine that not too far into the distant past, it is totally possible that medical practitioners did advertise their services and that many had patients who paid them directly. There have been a few examples in this video that have suggested that. Galvanism, electrical treatments, midwives, they all seem to have charged for their services. But at some point in their lives, all of those doctors and practitioners must have reached a stage where they themselves were just too old and too infirm to be called out 24 hours a day. So I thought it would be rather fitting to end with an advert from Dr. John Page of Lutterworth in Leicestershire. Dr. Page was not a stupid man by any means. When age forced another local doctor to stop working through the night, John Page went to the local paper and he cunningly placed a notice that was aimed at a very specific type of patient who would have shared certain experiences with half of your direct ancestors and half of mine too. Whereas Dr. Adams had advertised the public that by reason of his age he cannot attend patients in the night, and especially in cases of midwifery, fair enough, nobody knows how long a baby's going to take to be born, which requiring immediate assistance, I take this opportunity to let those good women know who are not already acquainted with my practicing midwifery that I shall be ready to attend them at all hours, and in compassion to the poor shall not insist on the large fee usually required to attend such cases. And the good success I have had hitherto with all the women I have been sent to on that account encourages me to give this public notice for the use and benefit of the fair sex. Signed, John Page. Because, after all, as an experienced doctor, John Page must have known that when babies are ready to arrive, they just are not going to wait. So it's just as well that he was there, ready and waiting to help whatever time of day he was needed. Perhaps he might have attended some of your ancestors. I think what is also interesting about that is, just as we understand today, doctors 300 years ago certainly understood that medicine can be a 24-hour-a-day job. I think it has been quite interesting to look into some of these adverts to see how people marketed themselves and the services they were offering, whether they were beneficial, harmful, or possibly totally ineffective. I think there has been a mix of all of them in there, but I hope this has given a little bit of an insight into some of the curiosities that are to be found in old newspapers, which give us a little hint about how our ancestors may have been treated when they were unwell.